Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Now, coming up today, it is all about you. This is your show because Dr. Neal Barnard is here to answer your diet and nutrition questions. So what is on your mind? Everything is on the table. Let's go ahead and welcome Dr. Barnard in. Sir, are you ready to answer a little bit about everything in just a little bit?
Looking forward to it, Chuck.
All right, so go ahead and post your comments or your questions in the comment box or the chat box, whatever it is that you want to call it, or you can tweet them to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. And we're also going to be taking a look at the coronavirus, where things stand as far as vaccine development. We're going to be doing that with Dr. Barnard momentarily. But first, before we get to any of that, let's get to this. Here are the health headlines for Friday, October 23rd, 2020. And we do begin with the coronavirus and the continuing surge of new infections. An alarming number of cases being reported Thursday, more than 73,000, one of the largest single-day totals since the beginning of the pandemic. Cases overall are up more than 11% week over week. And more troubling, deaths from COVID-19 now tracking upward by 15%, an estimated 1,000 coming yesterday as the death toll climbs beyond 223,000. In other news, a new paper published in the British Medical Journal shows that media reports of medical advancements reached through animal testing are more bust than breakthrough. Get this, the authors tracked reports from the year 1995 that touted successful animal studies on diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, and 25 years later, the authors say just one of these 27 so-called breakthroughs yielded a clear benefit to humans, concluding, quote, exaggerated and over-speculative claims will lead to general overconfidence among the public. They say the implications for animal welfare as a result will be severe. And finally today, would you confuse a veggie burger with a regular hamburger? Well, a leader of the British Meat Processors Association says it's happening more often than not and accuses plant-based food companies of deliberately trying to trick consumers. But critics say, yeah, that's just a bunch of malarkey. And research seems to actually back them up. One recent study finding consumers try plant-based meat more because they're curious than they are confused. The debate comes as the European Parliament weighed outlawing the terms such as burger and sausage from plant-based products. That proposal was voted down this morning. A consumer group applauding the lawmakers for what they call making a common sense decision. All right, before we get to the doctor's mailbag and your questions, let's turn back now to the coronavirus. And as we heard in headlines, cases are increasing exponentially. And it's not just happening here in the States, it's happening worldwide. Much of Europe experiencing dramatic spikes, so much so that many countries there are implementing strict lockdown measures once again in an effort to flatten the curve. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and bring Dr. Barnard to the Exam Room Live to get an update on where things stand with vaccine development. Dr. Barnard, where are we with this right now?
We are sort of trudging along in fits and starts. Let me share my screen with you because I want to walk you through what's been termed Operation Warp Speed. A little bit of hype there, but there certainly has been an unprecedented effort and billions of dollars here in the U.S. and in other countries dedicated to it. Of about 125 potential vaccines, there are three maybe front runners. One's from AstraZeneca, one's from Moderna, one's from BioNTech and Pfizer, BioNTech/Pfizer. However, the AstraZeneca one has run into some trouble in September 8th. There was a participant in a U.S. trial, I believe it was in the U.S., who became quite sick with a neurological condition, and the trial was paused in the U.S. It picked up in other countries, but in the U.S. it's still paused. And I think that's sensible because we all, or at least many of us, remember the swine flu vaccine that led to neurological problems, specifically called Guillain-Barré, which was this really troubling form of paralysis. And this was not caused by a disease, it was caused by the swine flu vaccine. And so AstraZeneca has correctly paused the trial to try to figure out, is it safe or isn't it? Now, Moderna has begun a phase 3 trial. And again, if you're not familiar with these terms, phase 1 is a very small trial to look for safety and early signs of efficacy. And then if all goes well, you go to phase 2 where you bring in hundreds of people. And you're again looking at safety issues, but also looking for signs of efficacy. Not that it prevents the coronavirus, but does it trigger an immune response? And if all goes well there, then you do a phase 3 trial in a huge number of people to try to see if those who get the vaccine candidate can have less likelihood of developing the disease than those who got an identical placebo. So Moderna has just been bragging that they've now got 30,000 people in their phase 3 trial. So fair enough. And BioNTech/Pfizer is also on board and moving ahead quite quickly. Now we've got some troubles though. Johnson & Johnson had what looked initially like a promising vaccine, but they had to pause it about 10 or 11 days ago because of an adverse reaction. And then back with, and Merck also. Then with regard back with AstraZeneca, just the other day, a volunteer died in Brazil. This was, if I understand correctly, a physician who was a volunteer in the trial, young, otherwise healthy, presumably healthy, but died in the trial. And so that made everyone very concerned about AstraZeneca, but very quickly, in other countries, they put it back on track, which they're not saying this, but that suggests to me that they broke open the blind, discovered that the person who died was on the placebo end of the trial, meaning didn't actually get the vaccine at all, and the death was unrelated. Who knows? We're waiting to see. But those top 3 are the ones where we think something's going to happen. However, there are many issues here with regard to vaccines. I mentioned 30,000 people for a phase 3 trial. Imagine what that means with regard to the job that you have to do to track adverse effects and track whether it works. To get an understanding of how complicated this is, nobody thinks that the vaccines are going to be 100% effective. If it's 50% effective, that's good. So let's say in a placebo arm, you get a certain number of people getting the coronavirus. And in the vaccine arm, you get hopefully somewhat fewer people getting the coronavirus. At what point do you say it's worth it? It's good. That every country has sort of their own view of when it's okay to go forward and when it's okay to decide it's safe. Now, you may have heard in Russia, there are actually 2 vaccines that they're actually using, neither one of which went through a phase 3 trial. So everywhere else, experts are saying I wouldn't go near that. And China, same story. They have also a candidate vaccine that's moved forward despite the absence of a phase 3 trial. So Chuck, that's really where we are at the moment. As long as we're talking about vaccine. And by the way, maybe I should mention a couple of other issues that have come up. To do these trials, you often have to select a population that is at particular risk of COVID-19. Because if nobody's getting challenged with the virus, you can't really tell if the vaccine works. Nobody in the control group got sick. Nobody in the vaccine group got sick. You just can't tell if it's any good. So they try to go to areas where the virus is really creating a problem. However, in those very same areas, health authorities say wear your masks, do social distancing, use good hygiene to try to keep everybody from safe so that nobody gets it. And then you really have no idea if the vaccine is working. And then a new ethical issue has arisen. A recent issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association raised the question, should certain groups receive an approved vaccine first? And they specifically raised the issue, should Blacks get a vaccine before other groups? Now, their argument was Blacks are at higher risk of a bad outcome in the event that they get COVID-19. The mortality is much higher. Here in Washington, D.C., Blacks are about 46% of the population, 75% of deaths. So they make the pitch, well, you should be first in line to get a vaccine. You can understand that argument. However, the counter argument is, wait a minute. Do you want to be the first one to get a vaccine? Could we really be saying you're going to be a test subject effectively and could be the first people to have dangers of the vaccine? Plus, others have weighed into this to say that there's nothing about the color of your skin that makes you more likely to be vulnerable to COVID-19. A recent study from Louisiana showed that while Blacks are at higher risk of a bad outcome with COVID-19, it has nothing to do with the color of their skin or their race per se. It has to do with two things: economic issues, who is able to work from home, who is not, who gets good access to care, who gets prompt care, those kinds of structural things that have disproportionately affected Black participants in research trials. That's the first part of the explanation for the bad outcome. The second part is diabetes rates or obesity rates and hypertension are higher in the Black community. So what some have argued is that people who have risk factors, regardless of race, maybe need the vaccine first, but that doesn't set aside the question of, are they going to be the first ones to have risks? I don't have the answers to these, but those are the questions that people are now raising. So while we're on vaccines, just real quick, I have to say I can't predict when this vaccine is going to come out. And to me, that's what WARP stands for. Many people have argued that now is the time to get a flu vaccine, and I've made this pitch a couple of times, and let me just repeat it again. If you are going to get a flu vaccine because you think, all right, I don't want to have COVID and flu, I understand that. If you're going to do that, use one of the vegan vaccines. Flu Block is one of the brands. It's egg-free, it's mercury-free, it's preservative-free. It is costlier, but probably more effective than the conventional ones, because the conventional ones use chicken eggs, and you inject a virus into a chick embryo, open the egg, you kill the virus that has replicated inside, then you inject that killed virus into another chick embryo, and it uses a lot of eggs, about 100 million per year. That has concerned people both for allergic reasons and also for ethical reasons. So Flu Block is a good one. It's the one we use at Barnard Medical Center. We also have one called Flucelvax, which started out way back when with a culture of cells taken from animals. However, the animals are no longer used, and the cell cultures are immortal cell cultures, so no further animals are used, and so the vaccine can be produced without eggs and without any animal use. So that's where we are, Chuck. That's the latest in the world of vaccines.
Certainly a lot to take in there. I like your warp definition. I love that. We aren't really predicting. That's fantastic. Okay, Q&A time here on the Exam Room Live. So if you have a question for Dr. Barnard, go ahead, type that in the chat box or the comment section. We're going to get to as many as we possibly can with the time remaining on the show today. So the mailbag is full. Dr. Barnard, let's go ahead and start to empty this thing out. Our first question comes to us from Nima. She's tuning in all the way from over in Iran. She's been reading your book. She wants to know, in chapter 12 of Your Body in Balance, it says, quote, raw is fine for lettuce and cucumbers, but not for cruciferous vegetables, which should be well cooked. Why is that? I don't like any of them when they're cooked.
Okay, I'm with you. First of all, thank you for listening, and delighted to be speaking to our friends in Iran as well as everywhere else around the world. Thank you so much for your interest in what we're talking about. Okay, broccoli, cauliflower, the other cruciferous vegetables, you'll see them on the crudité tray, and you take a bite out of it, and if you cook them, other people will probably be askance if they start turning into various shades of green and are soft like pudding. But you also will discover really maybe two issues. One is that uncooked cruciferous vegetables often cause a lot more digestive upset than the raw versions. And if you are having digestive problems on your healthy plant-based diet, you might want to cook your beans a little bit more and cook your cruciferous vegetables a little more. The other thing about it is that plants in their natural state have certain compounds that they make to repel insects. Or other invaders that want to attack their roots or their leaves, and cooking destroys those. So broccoli in particular has some compounds that can be destroyed with cooking. It doesn't mean that it's really toxic to eat it raw, but a number of botanists have suggested that it is a safer thing to eat cooked. So there you have it.
All right, here's a great question from Vegan Grandma. That's a great name, too. She writes, since being on a whole food plant-based diet and losing 40 pounds, my skin has been dry no matter how much water I drink. I started taking a vegan biotin supplement to help my skin. Is that safe? And are there any other ways that you can mention that would combat dry skin?
Good on you for having lost 40 pounds. Congratulations. You're an inspiration to everyone around you. If you have dry skin and you Google vitamins for dry skin, biotin will be one of the first ones to come up because it's a B vitamin and you do need it for health. Does it really work? The evidence is not super strong that it does. You can't take a supplement. There isn't any evidence that I have seen of dangers from it. The amount you need is about 30 micrograms a day. And if you exceed that, because it's water soluble, chances are you'll just excrete it. But it exists naturally in nuts and in seeds and traces in avocados and sweet potatoes. And that's why you don't hear people going out and getting a biotin supplement, because it's pretty common in these kinds of foods.
All right. Speaking of supplements, Christina writes, she wants to know, what are your top daily supplements besides B12? Are there any others that you advise to take as well?
Thank you for asking that question. So important. All right. Let's kind of go through these rules. I want to back up for anybody who's new to this word vegan and I want to lose weight and get my cholesterol down and tackle my diabetes. I hear a vegan diet is great, and it is. The rules are 4 groups: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes or beans. Okay. So, but we do need to supplement vitamin B12. You need it for healthy nerves and healthy blood. And the amount that you need is 2.4 micrograms for adults. There are no bottles that small. You'll see bottles of 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 micrograms a day. And just get the smallest bottle you can find. But your question is a good one. What else should I take? Normally, vitamin D comes from the sun on your skin. The UV rays hitting your skin create vitamin D. But if you use a sunscreen, or you're indoors all the time, or if you live in North Dakota, where I grew up in December, you are not soaking up a lot of UV rays from the sun. So that's when a vitamin D supplement makes sense. The government would say have about 800 international units a day. I would push a little bit higher to around 2,000 international units per day, and your doctor can test you and see if your levels are normal. All right, B12, D. Let me add one more. Iodine is a mineral, and it is very abundant in sea vegetables. So wakame and nori and all these have lots of it. But if you grew up in Omaha, you probably aren't eating seaweed very much, and you might get a little low in iodine, and your thyroid gland can't get the iodine it needs to make thyroid hormone. Now, iodized salt comes to your rescue. But if you are a modern person using Himalayan salt or sea salt or kosher salt, it's not iodized unless it specifically says it is on the label. So if you are never getting sea vegetables and you are never using iodized salt, then you might want to consider iodine as your 3rd supplement. And the amount you need is 150 micrograms a day. And frankly, that's about it. There are a million other supplements, but I treat them more like medicines for specific conditions rather than supplements for daily use.
All right, here we are headed into the cold weather season. We're talking about dry air, and now we're going back to dry skin. Judy wants to know, how much water should I be drinking? Perhaps she too is concerned about dry skin.
Yeah, if you asked some nutrition authorities, they'll say have 8-ounce glasses of water per day. That means 64 ounces of water. If you do that, you will never get out of the bathroom. And the fine print after that guidance to have 8 glasses of water per day says, or the equivalent in foods. Meaning, you made your morning oatmeal with what? Water. You're having soup with what? Water. You're having an apple, which has lots of water inside. So the truth is, you don't actually need to drink a glass of water ever, in theory. if you are getting lots of water in the foods that you are consuming. So I recommend that you not count. Don't count glasses, don't count ounces. But when you go to the bathroom, if your urine is very dark in color, you're dehydrated. If it's not, if it's clear or just very lightly straw colored, you're probably very well hydrated. If you still have dry skin though, you might want to consider not trying to treat it internally, but externally with various creams. And this is even a place where you can use something like coconut oil, which I do not recommend you ingest, but you can use it externally if you want. And there are lots of other products.
All right, here's an interesting question, one that's come up a little bit recently in the shows, the old raw versus cooked debate. This one comes to us from Lana. She wants to know, is a raw vegan and fruit diet of about 80 to 90% raw more healing for inflammation than a diet that is all cooked food?
Okay, neat. What a sophisticated audience we have. In theory, I think raw foods make a lot of sense because you would have to believe that our species did not evolve along with sterno. So we were eating a lot of raw things since time immemorial. Our problem now is it's not really entirely clear which are the best raw foods for us. What I mean by that is human beings began presumably in Eastern Africa. And from there, we got restless and started migrating all over the planet. And when people ended up in North America, they had for the first time tomatoes, potatoes, corn, peanuts, foods that were not part of our natural African diet. And what you discover is sometimes people don't react very well to certain foods that were not part of our diet since time immemorial, which is by way of saying, I'm never quite sure which are the raw foods that are best for us, but your gut will tell you, meaning if you're eating something that's not so good for you, you often get digestive symptoms and you can get inflammation, which brings me back to your question. An anti-inflammatory diet, part of the issue is what you include, but the real issue is what you kick out. Kick out dairy products. We see probably more inflammatory responses to dairy. I'm talking about people who have migraine triggers or rheumatoid arthritis triggers and others. Kick out dairy, kick out meat and eggs. And then beyond that, there are certain other foods that are healthy in theory, like wheat, citrus fruits, but that some people react to more than others, and you can see if avoiding them helps you. So that's a partial answer.
All right. And here's the next one. Comes to us from Mel. Wants to know, while pregnant, what are the best sources for calcium? How much should I be getting every day? And is it best to eat that with other foods to aid with absorption? Another sophisticated question.
Yeah, I'll tell you. It is good to have your calcium with other foods. Researchers at Harvard years ago started looking at adverse effects of calcium. If you overload on calcium, you can get kidney stones. Not super commonly, but it does happen. And what they found is that when the supplements are taken with food, it tends not to occur. The stones tend not to occur as much as when they're taken just by themselves. How much do you need? The government would say, if you are not pregnant, have 1,000 milligrams a day. If you are pregnant, you should have 1,200. My own read of the literature suggests that both of those numbers are overly generous. And the reason I say that is it's just been really hard to show any substantial benefit from calcium supplementation over very roughly about 600 milligrams per day. And your sources, of course, should be green leafy vegetables. That's kind of number one. That's where the cow gets the calcium from. Cows eat grass. You'll hopefully have kale or collards or Brussels sprouts or broccoli or something like that. But green leafy vegetables come top, and then there's also calcium in the bean group and lots of other foods.
All right, we heard Vegan Grandma. She's having some weight loss success. Apparently, Jolena is becoming inspired. She wants to know, Dr. Barnard, can obese people lose weight eating a vegan plant-based diet? And if so, how much and how fast? That is always the question. How quickly can I get this off?
Okay, just so I understood the question, Chuck. So the question is, will a vegan diet lead to weight loss? And if so, how quickly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have studied this in lots and lots of people, and you never know the answer until you just try it. There are a few rules of thumb. The more weight you have to lose, the faster it comes off. So in other words, if you have really accumulated quite a lot of weight, you often will see weight loss very rapidly when a person follows this diet. Secondly, this is not fair, but my kind of back of the envelope calculations suggest that men lose weight a little bit faster than women do. I suspect that is because belly fat comes off quicker than thigh fat. That typically, it's just a general observation, but the rules remain the same. But the biggest issue here that I find when a person is going vegan and they're trying to lose weight, if you're not losing weight very rapidly, write down everything you eat for about 2 days and look for fatty foods, nuts, nut butters like peanut butter or almond butter, oils, guacamole. Every gram of fat has 9 calories packed into it, and carbohydrates have only 4. So the fatty foods are going to slow down your weight loss. How quickly on average? In our research studies, you see, maybe anywhere between a half a pound and a pound per week with a person who is not exercising, not restricting their portions at all, and just going to a low-fat vegan diet. If that sounds slow, keep in mind there are 52 weeks a year, and if you're losing 52 pounds or even 26 pounds, that would be a half pound a week, you're losing weight a lot faster than you gained it. So that slow, gentle weight loss is perfectly fine. You can accelerate it by adding exercise, adding raw foods, really keeping the fat content low. I would suggest not restricting portion sizes unless you have particular eating issues, and in which case you want to be guided by your caregiver.
All right. And follow up to that from Audrey. She wants to know, is it best to slowly transition to a plant-based diet or push that stack to the middle of the table and just go all in?
Go all in. I would go all in. And the reason for that is if you go really slowly, you're reigniting your desire for whatever the contraband is that made you sick in the first place. But we have a certain way that we do this in the Barnard Medical Center and in our research studies. And I have never seen anyone unable to do this. You take 7 days, and during those first 7 days, don't take anything out of your diet. You can still eat meat, eggs, cheese, whatever you're eating, but your job during these 7 days is to identify low-fat vegan foods that you like, and you just make a list. Write down breakfasts and lunches and dinners that appeal to you. So oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins, bean chili instead of meat chili. You've got 7 days to come up with a list of plant-based foods that appeal to you. And at the end of 7 days, you'll have a really good list. Okay, so now step 2 is to take 21 days and do it all vegan all the time for those 3 weeks and without any animal products at all. But that's really easy because it's only 3 weeks. And secondly, you already have a list of foods that you like. In fact, they're on your shelf and in your fridge right now. And at the end of those 21 days, 2 things will have occurred. Number 1, you will be physically healthier. You'll lose weight, your blood sugar is coming down, and so forth. But the other thing is that your attitudes about foods are changing. You discover you don't really miss the meat or the cheese or the eggs. If you had done it just gradually and you had some cheese yesterday, you're going to want it today. So any move that you make is good, and if you're slowly declining, that's all great. You're doing wonderfully, but try my 2-step method. 7 days to check out the possibilities, 3 weeks as a test drive, and it will change your life.
All right, we're going to sneak 2 more questions in here quickly. This next one is a little bit yucky, but you know what? It's also that time of year, so it's fitting. This one is from Julie, who's watching us on YouTube. She wants to know, are there any foods that would cut down on the amount of mucus that we produce? It is, in fact, that time of year where my sinuses get a little bit full.
Oh, yeah, dairy comes top for this. And you'll see this manifests in all kinds of ways and at every stage of life. Little children who have middle ear issues, that back when people would fly on planes and the plane is starting to go down and the pressure is building up in the ears. Kids who have a lot of inflammation in that part of the respiratory tree, I'm talking about the inner ear, they cry and so forth. And when those kids you remove dairy, some of those kids are going to do better. Then a little bit later, you have asthma, you have other respiratory issues. Get away from dairy products. It seems, my sense of this is not that a person necessarily is allergic to dairy, but it's making other sensitivities more pronounced. And I do think we need more research on here, but you don't need to wait for another randomized clinical trial to just try it for yourself. In my experience, we see that avoiding dairy is the most help. And when I say dairy, I mean even non-fat dairy, because it's probably the protein in it, not the fat, that is eliciting this sensitivity reaction.
So it sounds like it's more of a case, if you want to help in that arena, it's more of what you don't eat versus what you do. So get that dairy out. Is that correct?
Yes, very much so. Yes.
All right. Final question comes to us from Gina. Again, man, this is a question that would only be asked in the fall. I know it's pie, and I can probably guess what the answer is. But she says, since it is the season, I will ask anyway, is there such a thing as a healthy pumpkin pie?
Of course there is. Sure. Now, I am not a chef, I'm a doctor. But the last time I checked, when people make pie, they start out with some pretty healthy things, like they start out with pumpkin. And then they put them in there, but somewhere in the recipe, there is one truckload of sugar and another truckload of some kind of shortening or grease. But you will find on our website at pcrm.org, you'll find recipes for healthy pies that have more healthful sweeteners and more healthful sort of bulk agents, so that you don't have to make your coronary arteries slam closed just to have dessert.
All right. Great answer, Dr. Barnard. Thank you so very much for your time today, my friend.
Well, thanks to you, Chuck, and thanks to all of our listeners.
Have a phenomenal weekend. We will talk to you again on Monday. And if we did not get to your question today, have no fear. The good thing is we will save each and every one that has come into the mailbag, and we will do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. And by the way, if you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and like us on Facebook and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, both of which are absolutely free. And this way you will get automatic updates every single time we go live, so that you can raise your nutrition IQ with us every Monday through Friday. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the Exam Room podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify, wherever shows are available. Go ahead and do that and leave a 5-star rating as well. Lots of ways to get all of this potentially life-changing and life-saving information. Now, all this month, it is our Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign. So many wonderful people getting involved to help lower the risk of being diagnosed. Actors Alicia Silverstone and Mary Steenburgen and Ted Danson, they've all partnered with us, along with renowned surgeon Dr. Christy Funk, to beat a disease that will strike 1 out of every 8 women during their lifetime. And we want for you to join with us. So go ahead and head over to letsbeatbreastcancer.org. And there you will learn the 4 steps, our 4-pronged approach for beating breast cancer, steps that you can follow right now. And when you sign up and you say, yes, I will follow those steps, you will also be registered to win a great grand prize pack by one of our sponsors like Salad Master or Orga Foods. These are phenomenal plant-based prize packs you will find nowhere else. You see some of the wonderful items right there on the screen. So that's all over at letsbeatbreastcancer.org. Learn the science, pledge to follow those steps, and get registered for that great grand prize pack. And that's going to do it for us today and this week. I want to say thank you one more time to Dr. Barnard for making the time to enlighten us today, and also to the crew behind the scenes that makes this show possible. And to you, my friend, who is watching now, my exam roomie, thank you for tuning in and learning along with us. On behalf of everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We will talk to you again on Monday, but until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.